Hello everyone! Welcome to Melissa's Musings. I am in my outside backyard oasis again. Feels so good to be out here. I feel so accomplished every time I'm out here. I'm like, it feels so good to be doing a musing in this space. Because you guys know it's been quite the road, quite the accomplishment to get here. So as some of you trickle on, it's my second Tuesday at noon for Melissa's Musings. So I know, like some of you, maybe Yaya, my grandmother, added it to the calendar. Tuesdays at noon is when I'm coming to you for Melissa's Musing. And the reason being, I just wanted to be a bit more consistent for myself and for my audience and really connect with you guys on a weekly basis and be available to you consistently at a specific time. So that you know that no matter what, Tuesdays at noon, we can always connect. So what's been coming up for me this past week is how resounding perception is reality. Like basically how resounding that fact is, that perception literally is reality for an individual. And where that's been coming to light for me this past week is in a variety of different client examples. So I actually have a few stories that I'm going to share with you guys that very specifically go into detail how perception can totally transform our individual reality. But also just it's such an important reminder that our perception quite literally is our reality. So whenever we are experiencing anything, whether we're navigating through our breakfast, we are pulling into our filing cabinet full of shit. We're basically going into those archives of our own personal experience to then produce a reaction. So let's just say you're eating breakfast and it's a totally normal day. Well, you might be going through your filing cabinet thinking, this is standard, this is totally like yesterday. Like maybe you just navigate throughout your day and produce a totally normal reaction. Well, maybe maybe you're vegan and somebody puts down a plate of bacon in front of you first thing in the morning and you're like, nauseating, right? You fight off the gag reflex and you're like, what are you doing? I'm vegan, right? You're pulling from your experience, your filing cabinet to produce a reaction that is like offended that this person doesn't know you're vegan, offended about the fact that you're getting served bacon. You're probably a bit perturbed. You're like, what's happening here, right? You are producing a reaction based on this, your filing cabinet full of shit that I like to say. But people refer to it as a variety of different things. It's your monkey brain, your ego conversation, the voice inside your head, that little shit that likes to sit on your shoulder. You and I are both familiar with the little monkey brain, correct? It is the thing that is driving us to navigate our thoughts, actions, and our reactions. So, what has been really powerful this week for me to realize is that perceptions can be so deeply ingrained in us that they will quite literally produce our reality, and every single person's reality is different. Basically, my world while it has a lot of similarities to John's, it looks completely different because John's childhood and John's upbringing and John's religious background and all of these things about John that have brought him to literally today are so different than the experiences that have literally brought me to today. So, example like A and A could happen to us in exactly the same capacity. And I know from personal experience that I will react a very different way than John will because I have a different filing cabinet full of shit that I'm pulling on. And I have way different experiences that have shaped me into the person that I am today than the experiences that John has had that have shaped him into the man he is today. So if you give us the exact same scenario, but place each of us into it, I can pretty much bet money, guarantee that we are not going to produce the same response. And I would bet money on that because I know my husband very well and his reactions are not mine. He produces and responds and reacts to things way different than I do because his perception is totally different and the way that his mind works is totally different than mine. So, this past week, I'm going to give you guys a little story and walk you through a situation that happened to me with one of my clients because it's going to, I think, be really crystal clear for you as well how much perception shapes our reality. So, I'm just going to tell you a little story. I'm negotiating an offer for my clients, negotiating it. They fell in love with a property, dream property, family lives down the road, great situation. Like, I'm feeling so stoked on the property because not only is it a great property, it fits their lifestyle, there's literally family down the road, like it could not be better. And we submit an offer. I immediately start doing my best as an agent to get that offer accepted. So I have a bunch of tools and tricks that I use, some of which is communicating, but basically I work relentlessly to get my clients' offers accepted. So we put our offer in, and immediately I start making our case for negotiation. My clients write a letter, we submit photos, I present our offer in a way that I think is really strategic in kind of showing how much my clients want the property, the things that they're willing to do. We write a really strong offer in terms of the offerings that we're giving to the seller. So we quite literally, when I'm representing my buyers, like to solve all of the seller's problems. So we strategically wrote a really strong offer solving all of the seller's problems. She needed a quick close. We came in with shortened timelines, all of these things. And for 2 days, I relentlessly work to get our client's offer accepted. And I let them know we offered X amount, I would fully expect a counter at this amount. And we have multiple conversations on expecting that counter and how it would likely be received. Fast forward 48 hours in, I'm rocking and rolling, I'm like this close to getting the offer accepted, feeling really good, doing the best job that I can do in presenting my clients in the best light, which from a seller's perspective is, here's the cream of the crop buyer, like you want to pick them over everybody else. They love it so much, right? And that's what I am trying to convince and give my seller the perception of. So that's what I want my seller to undoubtedly believe by the time I am done with my presentation of my buyer's offer. We end up receiving said counter. It is exactly what I prepared my clients for, and I had given them the expectation of. So the morning of receiving the counter, I actually was joyous. I reached out to them and I said, hey guys, we received the counter I've been expecting. It's actually at the dollar amount I was expecting it to be. Here it is. I sent it over and I received crickets. I didn't get any really response from the buyers. So they didn't mirror my excitement. I was like, woohoo, we got the counter I've been waiting for and fighting for. And I sent it off to them and I didn't hear anything. And I was like, that's weird. And so my perception starts to change. I start to create a story of what my buyers are doing. I'm like, oh, maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe they're touching base with their family down the road. Maybe, right? I don't know what's going on. I'm creating my own reality based on my perception. The next morning, so 24 hours goes by, and at this point I'm thinking, this is odd because it's the counter we were hoping to receive. It's the counter I was expecting to receive, and I sent it to my buyers excited and haven't heard back. So I call them. And it's at this point where I get to have a conversation with them about why they're feeling really disappointed about the counter. So their perception was much different than mine. Even though they were fully expecting the counter from the seller, their perception of it was, and I'm not sure why, but of course everybody's perception is their reality. So they perceived her counter offer, while expected, as kind of greedy, as out of line, like uncalled for. They thought that she was asking for too many things. So they decided to not mirror my excitement. I was like, yes, this is the counter offer we've been waiting for. They actually decided to instead pull their offer off the table, their initial offer. So doing the best job that I can do, I went back to the other side and I did some damage control and I said, you know what? They've been a little bit uneasy going over finances. They've decided to pull their offer. The other side immediately came back and was like, that's so bizarre. So they're choosing to not only not respond to our counter, they're pulling their offer. Does their initial offer still stand? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to my buyers and ask, does the initial offer still stand? Because 2 days ago, they were so excited about that initial offer. So I called my clients and I asked them a question. I said, so that I know what has changed in the last 48 hours from our initial offer to now. They didn't have anything that had changed or shifted in the last 48 hours. And so I asked them again, I said, does your initial offer still stand? The sellers asked me. Instead of thinking about the fact, okay, does our offer still stand? The buyers immediately shifted into a really interesting perception. They immediately shifted into, oh, so the buyer didn't have any offers on the table. They were totally full of shit. And I was like, what gave you that perception? And they said, well, the fact that they're asking if our initial offer still stands. And I was like, no, actually, let me put you in the seller's shoes, right? If you are the seller and you have a buyer's agent who just worked 2 days relentlessly, like I was conveniently located up that listing agent's butt, as I do so often in order to get my clients' offers accepted, and I was this close to getting it accepted. I got the counter we were expecting, hoping to receive. I said, from that seller's perspective, from their perception of the situation, would you or would you not think it's odd to have a buyer write a really strong offer, literally write in a letter, have their agent working relentlessly to get it accepted, and then have them pull that offer completely? Would that or would that not produce a strange, like, would you or not be curious as if you were the seller? And they were like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And I was like, I know. And so what ended up happening is seller was stuck here, buyer was stuck here. Long story short, thanks to Melissa being conveniently wedged up said listing agent's butt, along with negotiations and back and forth, and ultimately solving the seller's problems, we did get that offer accepted. Our clients are happily in escrow right now in the perfect property. But that aside, it really brought up an interesting point, because such an interesting and simple example of a perspective shift, and a perspective, really how perception totally shapes a reality. The seller had one perception of what was happening. I had a totally different perception of what was happening. My buyers, totally different perception of what was happening. They were offended about the counter offer. They ended up, having a different experience of what the seller wanted when she responded with her counter. When they pulled their offer completely off the table, the seller's perception of everything that was happening went completely haywire. So what ended up happening is, to maintain the perception that I was using to my advantage, basically trying to get our offer accepted from the other side, from the selling side, I blamed our morning of back and forth on a financial snafu. Because the last thing I would want the perception of the seller to be is that I have buyers who don't have their shit together, who are flip-floppy, or who are uneasy in their decision, right? I want the perception of my buyers for the seller to be rock solid, to be the strongest buyers on the table, to love the home more than any other buyer on the table, right? You as agents know that. It's my job to portray that. And so it was such an easy, really like palpable example of how perception can totally base our reality. And I see that happening on a day-to-day basis, not only in our business, but in life. Half of the arguments John and I feel like get into are because one or both of us has a totally different perception of how something is happening, or we have a different perception as to how somebody is responding. Literally, John and I got into a disagreement this morning where, after the disagreement was passed, I literally asked him, I said, my perception of that conversation was that I had misscheduled myself based on the feedback you'd given me, but I feel really confident in my schedule today. Can I have some feedback as to like where the perception you were coming from was, so I can have a clear understanding? And sometimes having that communication, that distinction between reality versus perception, can be so monumental and influential when it comes to communicating and maintaining relationship, and also achieving win-wins. Because I feel like at a certain point, until we're able to actually acknowledge that wherever the person you're communicating with is coming from actually is legitimately their reality. So as soon as you're able to accept that that is their reality, I find that communication actually ends up being a lot easier. And it's a lot easier to, I feel like, have empathy, and to also really see where somebody's coming from if you start to acknowledge their perception, which is then causing their reality. So it comes up for me very often, because John and I, we hold each other to be our best selves always. So it's very often that we'll call each other out on our bullshit. And so it's not uncommon for me to say something and for John to be like, no, that is absolutely your perception of it. Because I'll say something that is based on the way I was raised, or based on, the way my mom would have responded to something or reacted to something, or the way that my dad maybe as a kid reacted to me in multiple situations. So it happens very often where John and I will call each other out in a really positive way, not like your perception. No, it's like, I love that you just said that. I would take a moment to acknowledge that I think that's your perception and not reality. And so if you're in that space with yourself too, and you're in that space of growth and always constantly kind of evaluating and observing how you're navigating through the world, you might be really surprised to see that at a lot of times, maybe you're bringing that perception to light instead of reality. And so just be cautious as to how you are using those perceptions to base your reality, and then in turn how you're communicating effectively. Are you being effective in your communication? Are you really focusing a lot of energy on your particular perception and not allowing the basis or understanding for others because you're so closed off to it? So there is so much opportunity available to us in not only growth, but really self-development and all of the things when we start to acknowledge the fact that the world that we live in is very particular to us. Like, I know that I live in Melissa's world. I frolic through Melissa's world because my perception is my reality. And John's world is so much different, and should I want to frolic through his, I get to have an understanding of his perceptions so that I can fit into his reality. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. I love you. Thank you for those of you who tuned in. I had a bunch of you guys join on here. Give me some love if you're liking the Tuesday at noon. I so appreciate you guys joining in here. I know it's a challenging time, but I'm just feeling like Tuesdays at noon for me were so mundane that I would have really loved to have something to kind of like light the fire under my butt midday on a Tuesday. So that's what I'm committed to, and that's what I'm here for. So even if I'm here by myself, I'm really grateful to be spreading my message and doing my thing. So I love you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day.